Okay, I know this page looks like there's a lot, so you can pause it and you can write some things down if you'd like, or you can just pause it as you go and copy it down. But basically in this video, we're going to start going from moles to grams of different substances. And so because we're going from different substances, these are actually two-step problems. So I've made this kind of graphic for us to use. And you're welcome to use this to practice, but I don't want you to use this as a crutch. I want you to get used to this so that you don't need to use it anymore. But let me kind of explain what's going on in our graphic here. So this shows us how we get from grams to moles of certain things and what kind of things we're going to use to convert in between them. So for example, in the last video, you were working from going from grams of something to moles of something else. And to do that, you were going to use the molar mass from your periodic table and set up your molar mass ratio and go from your grams to your moles. You also have practiced a couple assignments ago going from moles of one thing to moles of a different thing. And when you did that, you would use your mole ratio from your balanced chemical equation. So far we've just been doing these one-step problems where you're just going from one to another thing and you can use an easy ratio. Now we're going to start doing things that now are going to be these two-step problems where we're going to have to go from one thing to something else and then from that to something else again. So you're going to be two different steps. This will make more sense as we go along, but I'll be referring to this picture a lot to hopefully help give you guys some type of a visual that you can use. So let's just jump into it and hopefully it'll make sense as we go. Again, as always, if this is not making sense, please send me an email. I want to help you out. I know that this is a little bit of a harder unit and there's kind of some math and it just takes lots of practice to get it down. So don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. So let's read our first problem right here. So it says, given 7 moles of NaCl, how many grams of Cl2 are produced? So when I read this, the key things are first that 7 moles of NaCl, it has a number in it. I know that's my starting point. We're starting with 7 moles of NaCl. The other thing is that we see that we're trying to go to grams of Cl2. So when I see that we're trying to go from moles to grams, and I see that we're trying to go from two different substances, I know that I'm going to have a two-step problem here. So to start off my problem, I'm always going to start with the number it gives me. So I'm going to say we're going to start with 7 moles of NaCl. Now I know I want to get to grams of Cl2. But there's no one good way to go from moles of one substance to grams of a different substance. You'll notice up here, there's no one way to get to from grams of A to moles of B in just one step. Or grams of B to moles of A in just one step. It's going to be a two-step process. And so right here we're starting off with moles of NaCl. So it's kind of like we're starting here on our chart. And we're trying to get to grams of something else over here. And so we're going to have to do a two-step process to get to this point. So you'll notice in our first step, we need to convert this moles of NaCl to moles of a new substance, moles of Cl2. That's kind of your first step in these problems, is try to get it into moles. So we're going to take this NaCl, we're going to try to convert it into moles of Cl2. As you can see up here, it says to use your mole ratio from your balanced chemical equation. So I want to use my mole ratio for my balanced chemical equation to get from moles of NaCl to moles of Cl2. You'll also remember that since we're going to cross off these units from top and bottom, that we want to make sure that we put our moles of NaCl down here and our moles of Cl2 up on top, because we want to be able to cross these out and cancel them out, and we don't want NaCl anymore in our problem. So that's what helps you know what thing to put on top and bottom, is that you want to make sure that whatever is over here, you can cancel out down here. So since moles of NaCl is over here, we want moles of NaCl down here. Now remember, this says we're using our balanced equation, so we're going to go up to our balanced equation and see that there's 2 moles of NaCl for this problem. So 2 moles NaCl. Now you'll also see that we're trying to get to grams of Cl2, so we want to go from moles of NaCl to moles of Cl2, right? Because we're using a mole ratio to go from moles of one thing to moles of another thing. And so we're going to go from moles of NaCl, we want moles of Cl2 on the top. In our problem 2, you'll notice that there's only 1, right? Because we're going to use our balanced chemical equation to figure out there's only 1 mole of Cl2. Alright, so at this point you can kind of see that we've canceled out now our moles of NaCl because they're on top and bottom, and we have moles of Cl2. And we're still not done yet because we need to grams of Cl2. So now that we're at moles of Cl2 and we're trying to get to grams, we just have one more step. And you'll notice in between this moles and this grams, that's when we're going to use our molar mass from our periodic table. So on the bottom, remember, we want to be able to cancel these things out. So we have moles of Cl2 here. We want moles of Cl2 on the bottom. On top, we want what we're going to. So we're going to grams of Cl2. So on the top, we're going to have grams of Cl2. So to figure out this top number, the grams of Cl2, you have to use your periodic table. And so when we use our periodic table, remember, we're going to look up the mass of Cl2, and you're going to times that by 2, right? Look up the mass of Cl, times it by 2. I think the mass is about 34.45. I'm pretty sure Cl is about that, and then you're going to times it by 2, and you should get around 70.9 grams per 1 mole. So we know in a mole of Cl2, we're going to have 70.9 grams of Cl2. Remember, we find that from our periodic table. And the amount of moles is just going to be for 1 mole of Cl2. Lots of students get confused about this and this. We always know if we're using our grams from our periodic table, it's going to be for 1 mole. If you're using a mole ratio, is when we have to go back to our equation and use the moles there, all right? But if you're ever putting in grams from your periodic table, it's going to be for 1 mole, so you don't ever need to think up of a number. All right, so we see now, if we're looking at our units, that this moles of Cl2 is on top here, and the moles of Cl2 is on bottom there, so we're just left with grams of Cl2, which is what we're trying to work towards. It's asking us for grams of Cl2. So now if we do our math, you can see that it's 7, we're going to times by 1, divide it by 2, and then we're going to times by 70.9 and divide it by 1. So you should end up getting around 248 grams of Cl2. Okay, we get our number from just doing our math, dividing and multiplying across, and you get your grams of Cl2 from that being the unit left over. All right, let's try to work on this next problem. So as we read it, we'll try to look for some key things. So this one is saying that we're getting 61 grams of Na produced. How many moles of Cl2 are produced? So we're going now from grams of Na to moles of Cl2. So you'll see, if we're starting with over here, the grams of Na, and we're trying to get to moles of a new substance, it's going to be, again, a 2-step process to get there. So let's start with our grams on this one side. So we're going to start with 61 grams of Na. And remember, always just start with whatever your problem gives you. So whatever number gives you is what you're going to start with. Since we have grams of Na, remember I said we always want to try to change it to moles. So, since we're doing this first step, going from grams of A to moles of A, we're going to use our molar mass from our periodic table. That's what we're doing to get this step. So, we're going to times this by, remember on the bottom, you want whatever is here to be on the bottom, so we cancel it out. So, on the bottom, we need grams of Na, and on the top, we want moles of Na. So, on the bottom, you'll look at your periodic table to figure out how many grams of Na you have. It'll be 22.99 grams of Na. And then on the top part, you'll figure out your moles of Na. And remember, if you're ever using your periodic table to figure out grams, it's always just going to be for 1 mole of Na. Okay, so now we're about right here. We're at moles of a substance, and we need to get to moles of a different substance. Right? We're trying to go from Na to Cl2. So we need to use our mole ratio from our balanced chemical equation to go from moles of Na to moles of Cl2. So we're going to multiply it by... and remember, on the bottom, you're going to want whatever is on the top here so that they can cancel each other out. So you want moles of Na on the bottom. And we look at our equation, we see there's 2 moles of Na in this equation. So you have 2 moles of Na on the bottom. And on the top, we want moles of Cl2 because that's what we're trying to work towards, moles of Cl2. So you use your equation, you see there's just 1 mole of Cl2 for the top. Sorry, I've never hit this button before. Alright, so you'll see that we have 1 mole of Cl2 for the top. Alright, now if we try to cancel out our units, you'll see that we have grams of Na on top here, grams of Na on the bottom. You have moles of Na on the top, you have moles of Na on the bottom. So you're just left with moles of Cl2 for your units. If you do the math, we'll do 61. We're going to times the 61 by 1. We're going to divide by 22.9. We're going to times it by 1. We're going to divide by 2. And so in the end, you should get approximately, I need to actually use my calculator for this one. I didn't figure it out beforehand. So I'll grab my calculator to do this math. I'll do 61, divide by 22.99, and then I'll divide that again by 2. So you should get approximately 1.33 moles of Cl2. Okay? Alright, so hopefully this kind of image up here helps you guys as you're going from one thing to a different thing to a different thing. You can use this image. You can use the different ratios that it tells you to use in between them. And watch the next video too before you get too confused with stuff, because the next video I think will help you also understand this part better. Okay, good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.